gets up on the inside, and here comes Cross Counter. Cross Counter coming at Marmello. Cross Counter's flying. The Blue Army have done it at last. Cross Counter has won the Melbourne Cup.
Did you have a theory about how many times you would have to call the field in the race? Where do you start to not call the 24 and just concentrate on maybe the 12 or 16 that can win? Was there a theory behind that?
It worked out just happened for me. I'd call them, settle down, they'd get to the 2800, you'd run through the entire field. By that time, they're at the turn out of the straight, so you get through the field a second time. By that time, they're at the mile. You can just about get through the field again before the race really changes complexion at about the 800, 900 metre mark. And from that point on, it's just those that are within your sights that can win the race. So you get through the field 3 times just as a matter of course.
It is natural, Greg. I completely agree. It feels just natural, Sam. I mean, I never went out to say I've got to do it 4 times and then go back to the... It's not the way we do it. And that's that rhythm we talk about. And something might happen in the race, so you've got to dwell on it slightly. But no, it's just it's part of the rhythm. I mean, just before we sat down today, the boys were telling me about how it's changed since I caught it with the marquee there. So as they leave the straight, and Greg, you might tell that story, because just how Greg had to change a couple of things that he'd been doing for many years because of the commercialisation and the popularity of the Cup.
Yeah, well, there's a marquee now built in the middle of the course, and it obscures the view from around about the 2,000 metres to nearly the 1,700. So the way I called the Cup, as I explained to you, I'd go back to the leaders at the 2,000 metre mark. But if I continued to call it that way, the field would be obscured. And those horses I'd be wanting to call at that point of the race, running 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, I couldn't see them. So they installed an isolated camera on the leaders. So I had to switch from calling the race live, call it off the monitor, and then go back at about the mile, or just before that, about 1,700, to pick the field up again with the binoculars.
I find the hardest part is going back to the binoculars after the screen. I'm happy with the screen, but the problem is when they leave the straight, you're already conscious of the fact you're about to lose them. So you might be halfway through the field and you think, well, I've got to get through the 24 now before I get back to the leader when they disappear. So you're already thinking, and I think as a race caller, you tend to make split decisions on the run and you don't even know you're doing it. So there's all these little things going on in your mind. Yes, things can just happen out of the blue, but you've got to make a split decision right there.
Sam, it's hard to explain, but and just listening about the turmoil that can take place in your stomach when you're calling something that's so big. And for Matt there, it's an on-the-run decision. Greg's made 36 of them. Danny, more than 11 or 12. And on that day, and any big day, it's hard to explain unless you're the person doing it. And I think I know exactly how Matt's feeling. These boys would too. You've got to make those calls and then you've got to move on. I'd be fascinated to ask Matt, or maybe Greg or Dan, do you think we'll ever see the time where you won't need binoculars to call the Melbourne Cup? Because I didn't use the monitor. I heard Greg did a bit, Matt does a bit, Dan, I'm not sure, but he didn't either. But would there ever be a time where you won't need your binoculars to call the Melbourne Cup?
I think we will.
Wow.
I know in France... In France, at the moment, the course broadcasters are calling from a studio in Paris, and they're actually sending the call
Do you think they'll
out.
do the arc like that?
I think they still do the arc at the moment,
And
like
that's
we
been
would.
for a while, too, hasn't it?
But I do believe in England, the callers for ITV and On Course, they actually have a monitor, and they have some equipment with them that they pick their camera angles. So maybe, and we're not quite to that stage, but I think with the drone vision, the tracking vehicle, helicopters, cameras all around the track, I think we're getting to that technological stage where we could sit there and perhaps switch cameras and call it that way.
You don't want anything to upset, and we use that word again, rhythm. And I mean, it's so important because it does upset, and it might be that just that minuscule thing that upsets you from satisfying your performance or your work that day by something that shouldn't be in the way. Therefore, we have to go to a monitor for a moment of the race to cover that.
Do you think as race callers, though, that we're so used to being on our own that we want to be on our own and the only thing we have are our trusty binoculars.
And I think there's and that's one of the reasons I asked the question, because with the monitor, you are relying on someone else.
Yes.
You're relying on them to follow your call. And if they don't, if they're on a different, if they suddenly go somewhere that you're not, then it changes. But it's a leap of faith to do it off the monitor. It's easier. It sounds hard to say, but it's easier off the monitor, isn't it?
Yeah, you can see them more clearly.
And yet, there is something in what you said. You and the binoculars, and that's the challenge.
Yeah.
But I'm fascinated to hear you say that even in your next few years, maybe you'll call the cup completely off the monitor.
It's all about seeing and then being able to identify them, and the things that have gotten away that we're talking about here. My worst experience, if I can share it with you, happened in 1989 in Torrific's Melbourne Cup. It was the first year that I'd been promoted to call on course, so that was an extra level of pressure there. So I was in a new broadcast box, and there was a little balcony, but it had remained empty all spring and all Derby Day and all Cup Day until they jumped in the Melbourne Cup. And I've got them here at the start of the race, and I've got this feeling there's somebody right there. And so I'm calling them down the straight the first time, thinking, I had a look, and it was two women standing there with huge hats, holding their champagne and watching me, not watching the cup. And I thought, if I don't get rid of these people, I won't be able to call the race at the turn out of the straight.
Swing around.
Yeah, so I had to swat them like flies. I got my race book and went whack.
I wish there was a camera on that.
You can imagine what that does. We're talking rhythm. You can imagine what that does to the rhythm of the race call. My heart starts pumping because I'm thinking, I'm not going to be able to call this race at the turn out of the straight. And then the physical action of hitting them. So I had to just redefine myself and get back into a rhythm. It was the most distressing moment I've ever had calling a Melbourne Cup.
Have you had a similar type of thing to that happen?
Not during the Cup. I've had some strange things happen. I don't know if I want to go there. But you always do in the broadcast box, don't you? But not during the Cup itself. A distraction like Greg had would blow my mind, to be honest.
Well, I think with broadcast boxes too, there's a fascination with them.
Is.
And people just want to be in there, and you make so many friends on big days, I find.
You want to work in the same manner that you're used to working, and that's the same people that you see all the time, and not be inundated with people wanting to visit. They all mean so well, but it's the day, if anything, you want to channel in and focus, because
And it never
you won't
happens.
get it back again.
It never happens that way.
Did you all have a rule about who could come into the box on Melbourne Cup Day?
Oh, Danny towards the end. I only did 4 of them, but Des Spain was always with me, and that he'd been with Clem, and so that worked. But the less, the better.
Absolutely. I had the technician. For the last few years, my son, who became very interested, Daniel, stood in the box with me, but that was it. Visitors are welcome, but there's a time when we wave goodbye.
Yeah, it works.
I think, to be honest, it's such a concentration game, and for the half an hour leading up, you need to be on your game. I think someone could be hitting me with a baseball bat and I wouldn't know.
Well, Greg did.
He wanted his job back.
Got that, young
Show me
man.
how you swatted it, Greg.
Well, it was... Babe Ruth would have been proud of me.
So you had one arm on the binoculars and the other one...
No, I was actually in the stands nursing a glass of champagne the time you called your first Melbourne Cup. It was beautiful.